I blog about prophecy, politics, and the supernatural, about things that are relevant. I'm a watcher, a watchman. What global life-changing event are you looking forward to? Anyone? Are the signs here and can we read them? Or is it just business as usual? But it is a warning, and we should heed the warning. Comet, asteroid, 3-mile wide mothership. A 3-mile wide ship would just about make anybody faint. Because what is coming is the great deception and pointing them to who Yahshua Jesus was and what he did.
When you see these things begin to happen, look up. And we know from Scripture, specifically Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. I say these, rattle these things off. All they are is the names of the people who wrote them in chapter headings. So when I say Matthew 24, for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, Matthew's the guy that wrote it, and you turn to chapter 24, and bam, you can find it for yourself. So that's a little bit of shorthand when I throw out those Scripture verses. That can be annoying to people who don't know what I'm talking about. But look, the bottom line is this. Yeshua, Jesus, 2,000 years ago, tells us, when you see these things begin to happen, look up, because your redemption is coming. Your rescue is coming. Hope is on the way. And he points to these certain signs. And he asks us, when you see wars and rumors of wars, famines, pestilence, earthquakes in diverse places, and troublesome times, know that these are the beginnings of the birth pangs, as he calls them. Now, what's interesting to note here, that when he wrote that 2,000 years ago, or when his disciples wrote those words down, attributed to Yeshua, Jesus, what's interesting is there's no way to track any of that before the modern era. In other words, if an earthquake of 9.0 happened in Fukushima, Japan, 300 years ago, and you lived in England, you would never know about it, more than likely, unless a seafarer or a trading vessel happened to be there maybe a month or two after that, saw that, wrote it down on a piece of parchment, sailed all the way back to England, and then took that parchment and gave it to officials, and information was disseminated word of mouth, one at a time. Well, in the modern era, we experience everything pretty much at the speed of live. What I mean by that, as an event is happening on the other side of the globe, we are seeing it in live right now, right as it's happening. We're watching it happen. A good example of that would be the Chilean miners being rescued from the mine. And the entire globe watched that because we're all linked up together with fiber optics, satellite television. So we are now in an era where we can track the earthquakes. In other words, what Yeshua, Jesus, calls the birth pangs. We are now in an era where we can track these things. So when an earthquake happens, like in Fukushima, we know about it. We watch that tidal wave come in in real time, which is unprecedented. So that's a little bit about, it's sort of a primer, gets things set up when you see these things. And I discuss the famines, the pestilence, the earthquakes in diverse places, and really stress the importance of knowing prophecy and understanding that the prophetic word in Scripture is there that separates. In fact, I ask this question when I'm out lecturing in places: what separates the guidebook of the supernatural, i.e. the Bible, from any other book on the planet? And I'll often get answers like, Jesus, that's not the answer. You know, miracles, no, that's not the answer. There's one element, the one dynamic that separates what we believe from anybody else on this planet, and that is the thread of prophecy from Genesis to Revelation. No other book has this thread that goes back thousands of years and yet is continuing now. We see prophecies being fulfilled in our lifetime. No other tome on this planet has that prophetic thread with 100% accuracy, 100% of the time. And that's what separates, what differentiates our book from any other book. In the Messengers of Deception DVD series, what I explore, and it's certainly not exhaustive because there's so much to talk about, but in Messengers of Deception, we start off with Darwinism and Madame Blavatsky. Madame Blavatsky was a channeler. She's also called the mother of the New Age. And she would do an occult technique called automatic writing, where she would go lock herself into a room, go into a trance, a familiar spirit would then possess her, and she would take pen in hand and just write for hours like this, without even knowing what she was writing because she's in a trance. That familiar spirit took over her body for that particular time, and through the occult means of automatic writing, she was able to produce voluminous works, which are really the basis of New Age theosophical teaching. What's interesting about Messengers of Deception, from there we go to Darwin. And why Darwin is not an occultist, Darwin has done more to undermine the Christian worldview than any other person before him, in my opinion. And is he a messenger of deception? Absolutely. I'm a biblical literalist and believe that the Most High God spoke everything into existence. I don't believe at all in evolution, any type of it, because DNA tells me that one kind produces its same kind. Mutations are often very, very harmful and detrimental to the DNA of a particular species. From there, we'll go into, let's say, Adolf Hitler, who certainly was a messenger of deception, right up into the modern era with the influx of gurus from India and the Near East that happened in the 60s, of course, and people like myself were caught up into that movement. We also discussed people like Rael, who's definitely involved in the modern UFO phenomena, who believes that he was sired by an extraterrestrial. So messenger of deception it's not exhaustive, but there are certainly enough people that I discuss in this to give you a good overview of a type of deception which is happening in real time even as I speak. In Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural, which is a 3 DVD set totaling almost 300 minutes, it's almost an exhaustive presentation of what I discuss in Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. We start off with getting the viewer, the listener, to understand that supernatural events have happened in the past. In other words, there's a phrase that I bring the person back to over and over and over again throughout the book and, of course, in the presentation. And it's this: the present political landscape is in direct correlation to supernatural events that happened in some cases millennia ago. What do I mean by that? There are supernatural events that have colored the body politic, shaped and colored the body politic. The examples I will use is that America is basically a Christian nation. People will argue with that, but the bottom line is this: we believe in Christmas. We celebrate Christmas. We also celebrate Resurrection Sunday, which erroneously we call Easter. That's another story. But all these celebrations are based on supernatural events. Example, Christmas is based on the virgin birth of the God-man, Yeshua, Jesus. Resurrection Sunday, or erroneously called Easter, is based on the resurrection of this same God-man who rose from the dead after his crucifixion, and 3 days later he rose again. So these are supernatural events, and they have shaped and colored the body politic. That's obvious. We celebrate, this is a national holiday on Christmas. So while we might not believe that the supernatural is manifesting today, we've shaped our entire culture. Similarly, let's say in Israel, they celebrate the Passover, a 4,000-year-old supernatural event that is shaped and colored the body politic. In Iran, they believe in Muhammad receiving the Quran. Sharia law is from the Quran. So we see that supernatural events, and I don't agree that they're similar to our supernatural events, but nonetheless, supernatural events have shaped and colored the body politic in Iran, so much so that now Sharia law dominates that entire country. So from there, once I get a person to understand that supernatural events have happened in the past, that begs the question: if these events happened then, supernatural events, are they happening now? And of course, the resounding answer to that is a yes, a huge, big yes, because I believe these events, supernatural events, are manifesting on the planet. We go into the prophetic after that, which discusses ancient prophecies written in the guidebook of the supernatural, i.e. the Bible, which are now coming to pass. Certainly Ezekiel 38, Psalm 83, Isaiah 17. Shorthand for a confederacy of nations that surround Israel in the latter days, Ezekiel 38, and come up against her. Psalm 83, a confederacy of nations, Arab nations only, that attack Israel, and Israel responds and expands her borders. Isaiah 17, which states that Damascus is a ruinous heap. So we see these prophecies that have laid sort of dormant for thousands of years, and yet now in the political scene we see those very players that these prophecies name with great specificity coming into the fray, coming in, the stage is being set, and it looks like there's going to be a battle. And maybe by the time this thing airs, we've already seen Ezekiel 38, that horrible war in the Middle East. And I believe it's sooner than later. So from there we go into the supernatural, and we look and discuss, and this might sound a little bizarre to you if you've never traveled in this stuff, but I assure you that the phenomena is real. It is happening. We discussed the cattle mutilations. Cattle are being abducted off farmers' fields in the middle of the night. They are found the next day. They're drained of blood. Flesh has been excised with laser-like surgical precision. And the carnivores or scavengers like coyotes and vultures won't touch the carcass. Strange stuff. We also discussed the so-called alien abduction scenario. And what we do is we weave all this and tie it back to Scripture. Remember, these are not extraterrestrials. These are interdimensional beings which are doing this. I tie all this back into Genesis 6 and the Nephilim. That's sort of the basis of the politics, prophecy, and the supernatural. And it begs the question, again, if these supernatural events happened in the past, which we as Christians believe they all did, what's to say that they're not happening now? And of course, I believe that they are happening now. So politics, prophecy, and the supernatural is a hard-hitting expose of what is happening in the political, the supernatural, and the prophetic, and how they all intersect together, weave together, and dovetail together to paint this very, very, I would say, alarming picture of what is about to manifest here on planet Earth.